My name is Ciara, and I used to love the quiet. I moved to Oxford, Michigan for that very reason, craving solitude, a fresh start after a messy breakup and burnout. My cottage, surrounded by woods, felt like a sanctuary. I relished the silence, the sense of safety. But peace is fragile. The quiet began to change, turning from comfort to something heavy and watchful. The woods, once my shield, started to feel like a curtain hiding something unseen. I didn't know it then, but my sanctuary was about to become a cage. The first sign was a muddy footprint by the back door, too large to be mine. Then came the phone calls, dead air, always at dusk, as if someone was listening. Small things shifted in the house, a book moved, the thermostat changed. I tried to rationalize it, but dread crept in. I felt watched, a cold draft on my neck. The sense of presence grew, turning my home into a cage. I was no longer alone. My sanctuary was slipping away. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. I glimpsed movement in the woods, a dark shape too tall to be an animal. One night, a car followed me home, matching my every turn, headlights glaring in my mirror. Panic surged as I raced to my house, the car stopping at the end of my driveway. I bolted inside, heart pounding, and watched as the sedan sat in the darkness before finally driving away. The threat was no longer imagined. I was being hunted. The darkness outside was no longer empty. Nights became torture. Every sound was a threat. Then came the tapping, deliberate, patient, on my window. One night, I found the courage to look. A pale, gaunt face stared back at me, eyes wide, a twisted smile spreading as he realized I saw him. He dragged a fingernail down the glass, the screech echoing in my bones. I ran, barricading myself in my bedroom, sobbing. My home was no longer safe. The terror was real, and it had a face. I called the police, desperate for help. The officer was dismissive. No footprints, no fingerprints, nothing broken. He suggested I was imagining things, handed me a leaflet, and left. The dismissal was almost as terrifying as the stalker. I realized I was truly alone. My fear hardened into anger. If no one would protect me, I'd have to protect myself. Rest was no longer an option. Survival was all that mattered. The police's dismissal was a turning point. I realized this nightmare was mine alone to face. The man outside my window was playing a cruel game, and I was the target. Every time I left, dread twisted in my stomach. I knew he'd come inside. One day I found a dead blackbird on my bed, a message, and a Polaroid of me sleeping. He'd been in my room watching me. Nowhere was safe. Not even my own bed. Not even in my sleep. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. The dead bird and the photograph haunted me. My house became a prison, and I was both warden and inmate. I installed deadbolts, window bars, and blackout curtains, shutting out the world. Cameras came next. One for every angle, every door, every shadow. I watched my own home, searching for threats, but the fear never left. The cameras didn't make me feel safer. They just gave my fear a screen. The new locks and cameras didn't stop him. They only made him bolder. He saw my security as a challenge, taunting me with his presence. He played with the cameras, his masked face filling the screen, motionless and menacing. He left objects on my porch, a muddy boot, a doll with gouged eyes, dead flowers. The message was clear. My fortress was paper thin. He rattled windows and doors, testing every lock, relentless. The siege had begun. I was trapped, waiting, listening for the next move. The night he tried to break the door down was the night my fear turned into something colder, something harder. It had been raining all day, a cold, miserable downpour that turned my yard into a sea of mud. The storm intensified after dark, with wind howling through the trees and rain lashing against the house in violent sheets. The noise of the storm was a comfort at first. It drowned out the small, creaking sounds that usually set my nerves on edge, but it also provided cover. I knew with a sickening certainty that he would use the storm. It was the perfect cloak for his intentions, the thunder masking the sound of his approach. Around midnight, it started. It wasn't a rattle or a shake. It was a loud, percussive thud against the back door. My entire body went rigid. I scrambled for my phone, my fingers fumbling to pull up the camera feed for the back porch. The lens was obscured by rain, but I could see a large, dark shape. Then came another thud, louder this time, stronger. It was the sound of a shoulder being thrown against the wood. He wasn't trying to pick the lock or test the knob, he was trying to break it down. The sound echoed the frantic, desperate pounding of my own heart. He was coming in. I backed away from my bedroom door, my eyes wide with terror, fixed on the hallway. Thud. A crack splintered through the silence between the gusts of wind. Thud. I could hear the wood of the doorframe groaning, splintering. This was it. This was the escalation I had been dreading. The locks and deadbolts were just a temporary delay. He was a force of nature, as relentless as the storm raging outside, and he was determined to get inside. I grabbed the heaviest lamp from my bedside table, its base a solid weight in my trembling hands. It wasn't much, but it was something. My mind was a white-hot blank of pure survival instinct. Another tremendous crash. And I heard the sickening crack of the doorframe giving way. The deadbolt was holding, but the wood around it was shattering. He roared in frustration from the other side, a guttural, inhuman sound that was snatched away by the wind. It was the first time I had heard his voice, and it was the sound of pure, unrestrained rage. He hit the door again and again, his fury a tangible thing, a wave of violence crashing against my home. I stood in the darkness, clutching the lamp, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I knew he wouldn't stop. He would keep going until the door gave way completely, and then he would be inside. A week passed after the night of the splintered door, an entire week of unnerving, unnatural silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and deceptively peaceful. There were no more masked appearances on my cameras, no more gifts on my porch, no more rattling of doors in the dead of night. The silence should have been a relief, a sign that perhaps my defiance had finally scared him away. But it wasn't. This quiet was different from the watchful silence that had preceded his attacks. This was a patient silence, a hunter stillness before the final pounce. The absence of his torment was, in its own way, a more profound form of psychological torture. It left me waiting for a blow I knew was coming, but I didn't know from where or when. The lack of activity lulled me into a dangerous state of exhaustion. My body, which had been running on pure adrenaline and terror for weeks, was starting to crash. The constant vigilance was a heavy weight, and I could feel it grinding me down. On this particular night, another storm rolled in. Not a violent, angry tempest like the last one, but a steady, drumming rain, accompanied by the low, distant rumble of thunder. The sound was hypnotic, a constant, soothing rhythm that seemed to wash over the house. It was a lullaby for a frayed and shattered nervous system. I told myself he wouldn't try again so soon. I told myself the new steel plate I'd bolted over the damaged door frame would hold. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt the heavy pull of genuine sleep. Not the light, restless dozing I had become accustomed to, but a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that promised oblivion. I checked the cameras one last time. The feeds showed nothing but rain-streaked darkness. I checked the locks on the doors and windows, a ritual that had become as natural as breathing. Everything was secure. I convinced myself that just for tonight, I could let go. I could allow the storm to be my shield, its noise a blanket that would hide me from the world. I crawled into bed, the sound of the rain on the roof a gentle, persistent whisper, and for the first time in weeks, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. This was my mistake. This was the moment of weakness he had been waiting for. He knew my routines. He had studied me with a terrifyingly intimate obsession. He knew about my cameras, my new locks, my frantic checks. He must have also sensed my exhaustion, my breaking point. He had used the previous week of silence to lull me into this exact state of false security. The storm wasn't a cloak for his violence this time. It was a cradle, rocking me into the vulnerability he needed. As I slept, oblivious and defenseless, he made his move. He didn't come to the front door or the back door. He had learned from his failures. He had found another way. I awoke to a noise that didn't belong. Not the rain, not the wind, something deliberate, scraping from the guest room. My heart pounded. He was getting in. I slid from bed, breath caught, listening. The window, too small, I'd thought, now pried open, yet he was inside. The air thickened. Every shadow became him. I moved toward the kitchen, my only chance. He thought the hunt was over. He didn't know the prey was about to turn. My hands trembled as I reached the kitchen, darkness pressing in from every side. I dared not turn on a light. It would give me away. My fingers found the chef's knife, cold, heavy, terrifyingly real. I'd only ever used it to chop vegetables. Now it was my only hope. Footsteps echoed, confident, unhurried. He was coming. He appeared in the doorway, a hulking silhouette. "Clara," he whispered. My name, a desecration, a glint of rope in his hand. His intentions were clear. I held my breath, knife ready, as the moment stretched into eternity. As his shadow consumed me, fear turned to explosive rage. He had stolen my peace, turned my home into a cage, and now stood over me, rope in hand. But I was not a victim. I was a cornered animal, ready to fight. Before he could react, I lunged, all my terror and fury in the knife. The impact was sickening. He howled in pain, no longer a predator, just a man who could bleed. I would not cower. I would survive. His words, meant to terrify me, only fueled my desperate strength. We wrestled for the knife, a grotesque, intimate dance of violence in the dark. His hands were strong, his grip like iron, but they were also slick with blood, both his and now mine, from where his fingernails had gouged my skin. I twisted my body, using the leverage of the countertop to push back against him. My bare feet slipped on a fallen apple, and for a terrifying moment, I lost my balance. He used the opportunity to slam my head back against the wooden cabinets. The impact was dizzying, a flash of white-hot pain. The knife clattered from my numb fingers, sliding across the linoleum floor and disappearing into the shadows under the table. Losing the knife was like losing my only lung. A fresh wave of pure animal panic surged through me. He had me pinned, his body a crushing weight against mine. His hands left my shirt and went for my throat. I could feel the pressure of his thumbs against my windpipe, a horrifying final pressure that was beginning to cut off my air. I clawed at his face, my nails digging into his cheeks, his eyes, anything I could reach. He grunted in pain but didn't let go. My vision started to swim, dark spots blooming at the edges, my lungs burned. This was it. This was how I was going to die, choking on my own kitchen floor. My flailing right hand hit something hard and metallic on the counter. The toaster. It was heavy, solid. With the last ounce of strength I possessed, fueled by the sheer biological imperative to breathe, I gripped it. I swung the small appliance with all my might, bringing it around in a desperate arc, and smashing it into the side of his head. There was a sickening wet crunch, a sound that was louder than bone breaking. His grip on my throat instantly went slack. He staggered back, a dazed, confused look on his face, his hands flying to his head. A dark, thick liquid began to pour from between his fingers. He took a stumbling step backward, then another, his legs suddenly unsteady. He looked down at me, his eyes wide with a final, dawning horror. He didn't see a victim anymore. He saw his own death. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but only a gurgling, bloody sound came out. He swayed on his feet for a moment, like a great tree about to fall, and then he crashed forward. He landed face down on the floor with a heavy final thud. His body twitched once, then twice, and then lay still in a rapidly expanding pool of black, sticky liquid that I knew, even in the darkness, was blood. I lay on the floor for a long time, gasping for air, my throat raw and bruised. The only sounds were my own ragged breaths and the steady, indifferent drumming of the rain outside. The silence he left behind was profound, a vacuum where his menacing presence had been. It was a heavy, thick silence, soaked in the metallic smell of blood. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself up. My body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached, and my head throbbed with a dizzying pain. I crawled over to the wall and fumbled for the light switch. I had to see. I had to be sure. I flicked the switch. The sudden stark fluorescent light was brutally revealing. The kitchen was a war zone. My kitchen. It was splattered with blood. On the floor, on the cabinets, on the pristine white face of the refrigerator. And in the center of it all was his body, lying in a grotesque, twisted position in a massive pool of it. His face was turned to the side, his eyes open and staring blankly at the leg of the kitchen table. It was the face from my window, the face from my nightmares. But now it was just a slack, empty mask. The sight was horrific, sickening, but strangely the terror was gone. It had been replaced by a hollow, ringing emptiness. He was just a man, and now he was just a body. My gaze fell upon the knife, lying near the wall where it had slid, then to the toaster, its chrome surface smeared with blood and hair. These mundane, everyday objects had become instruments of life and death. I stumbled toward my phone, which was still on the counter where I'd left it before going to sleep. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the numbers. 911. When the operator answered, a voice calm and distant, I couldn't form a coherent sentence. All that came out was a single, ragged sob, a sound that was part scream, part gasp, a release of all the terror and violence of the last few minutes, the last few weeks. I don't remember much of what I said. I think I just repeated, he's in my house and he's dead, over and over again, my voice a broken whisper. I slid down the wall, my back against the cabinets, and sat on the cold, sticky floor, not far from his body. I wrapped my arms around my knees and just stared into the wreck of my kitchen, the wreck of my life. The storm outside was beginning to subside, the rain softening to a gentle patter, and for the first time in a very long time, the silence in my house felt truly empty. The monster was gone. I was alone. I was alive. The wail of sirens broke my trance, growing from a distant cry to a deafening shriek that filled my driveway. Red and blue lights pulsed through the rain-streaked windows, painting the blood on the walls and floor in shifting shades. I sat motionless, wrapped in a blood-smeared nightgown, watching shadows of uniformed figures pass by the windows. A young officer entered, his eyes wide with shock as he saw me and the body on the floor. His expression softened and he asked gently, "Are you okay?" I could only nod. Paramedics wrapped me in a blanket and led me out, steering me around the body. Questions blurred together. I just stared at the wall, lights dancing across it. The detective who once dismissed me now looked on, horrified, finally understanding. I felt like a ghost, haunting the ruins of my own life, tethered to the violence in my kitchen. The world came back into focus, but it was changed, muted, sharp, and threatening. The police called it self-defense, but knowing his name brought no peace. I never spent another night in that house. Even after it was cleaned, I could still feel the stains, the presence, the fear. I sold it, desperate to sever the tie. The physical scars faded, but the ones on my mind remain. Now I live in a city, surrounded by noise and people. I survived, but I am not the same. I am rebuilding, piece by broken piece. For now, that is enough.